Okay, so we ended here on this review. So now we're going to move into supply. What is supply? Supply is the amount of ability and willingness of sellers to make goods. So just like demand, where it's not just I want something, but I'm not willing to spend my money, or I don't have the funds to purchase an item, same thing for supply. I have to be able to make it and willing to make it. Ability means the seller can produce and sell a product or service, right? If I don't have the ability to build birdhouses, then that's not going to be something I try to sell. Willingness means the seller wants to produce or sell it, right? If I have no desire to make birdhouses, then I'm not going to produce them either. All right. If you want to make a product, but you realize it's difficult to make, then you lack the ability. As well, if you find out that someone else will make the product easier and sell it cheaper, you're no longer willing to make that product. So if you think about an Etsy shop, there's lots of people that will do handmade crafts on there. And you have to consider, do you have enough time in the day to make a product when there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other people selling a similar product, right? If I don't want to devote the time, knowing I probably won't make that many sales, okay, then I have no will to make it. The term producer can refer to a supplier, a company, or an owner, whoever is supplying the good or service to the market. You are also supply if you have a job, in the fact that you are supplying your labor, okay? The quantity supplied means that the amount a seller is willing and able to supply at a set price. The law of supply. This is a direct relationship. It states that producers offer more of a good as its price increases and less as its price falls. Okay? So this is the exact opposite of the law of demand. Whereas if the price rises with demand, demand drops, okay? Right? Businesses want to make money. So if they increase their prices, they're going to produce more so they can make more money. Okay? So if the price of a donut goes up from $1 to $2, a baker will make more because now he will get more money for that product when his cost to make it remains the same. Supply schedule. It illustrates the law of supply using a chart. It shows two variables, a factor that can change, price and quantity supplied. You can show either an individual supplier's supply or the market supply. So this one here is Starbucks supply schedule and curve. Right here in the green is that supply schedule. Same as your demand schedule, we have a price and a quantity. Okay? Notice though that your supply curve goes up. It has a positive relationship. Okay? So, supply curves will always look like this. Remember that a demand curve does the opposite, okay? A demand curve goes down, demand, down, okay? Supply curve goes up, okay? So, just like with the demand curve, the supply curve can shift as well. When only the price changes, then that's just movement along the supply curve. But when other factors change, then the whole curve shifts either left, which is a decrease, or right, an increase. Okay? So that's what you see here, is shifts. And again, if you're just moving along the curve from one point to another, from one price, I should say, to another, that's movement. That is not a shift. A shift is when the whole line moves. Okay. So, what are some reasons that would cause the supply curve to shift? One of those is the change in costs of production. It can become cheaper or more expensive to produce the good, right? If I find a new technology helps me make those birdhouses quicker, then that's going to make my life easier. So I would want to increase production because it's making my life easier. Whereas if I'm making orange juice and we're in the middle of a snowstorm, and there's a frost damaging all the oranges, now I'm going to produce less of that product because it will cost me more to get the same amount of oranges and go find all these oranges and import them from other places than what it would be to just normally produce orange juice. Number of suppliers. If there's more suppliers, then there's an increase in supply. Same as the population increase when we've looked at demand. Alternatively, if there are fewer sellers, then there's going to be less supply. Technology. When better technology is introduced, it makes it easier and more efficient to produce a good or service, so the quantity goes up, right? If a factory finds that machines do the job better than humans, they'll get rid of the humans, put in more technology, they are able to produce more quickly, right? So they're going to shift, they're going to increase their supply. Natural or social causes. Natural disasters can affect the cost of production. The seasons can change production. Consumer taste can affect the supply as well, right? Silly bands. I don't know if you guys remember those, right? But I'm sure the market for silly bands, there's very little demand. Those fell out of style. So are people supplying them at the same rate that they were back in my high school days? No. All right, government regulation. If the government places an excise tax on a product, it will generally decrease the quantity supplied, right? Because that's what they're aiming to do. They want to put a tax on there to limit the amount that this is being made. Typically, you see this on alcohol or tobacco products. If they place a subsidy on a product, it will generally increase that. So they're helping to subsidize the price or the cost of production. Usually they do this with farmers. Okay. Sellers' expectations. If sellers expect there to be a demand or other factors, they will match production to meet that future expectations, right? So if we're looking seasonally, hey, we're going into winter. I want to produce more gloves knowing that it will be cold out and my consumers will want to consume more gloves. All right. Elasticity is the same exact thing for supply, only instead of looking at quantity demanded, we're going to look at quantity supplied, okay? So it's still the original minus new over original, and then original quantity minus new over original, again, times 100 because we're looking at percentage change. And then at step 3, delta QS, so change in quantity supplied over delta P, that change in price. All right, so when we're looking at the supply side, goods are typically elastic if they are cheap, easy, and require little time to make. So some of those examples of elastic goods that are supply side are notebooks, pencils, plastic cups, and haircuts. Goods that are typically inelastic if they are expensive, more difficult, and require more time to make. Fruits, right? Because a simple frost can wipe out a whole crop. Beef. It takes a couple years for a cow to get large enough for you to slaughter for beef. Construction work, right? Rome wasn't built in a day, and looking at Indiana roads, they weren't built in 5 years either, okay? So construction takes a lot of time. All right, costs of production. We're going to kind of breeze through this because we have a separate assignment for this, but I'm going to focus back on the homework real quick. All right, so you don't have anything where you need to look at supply here in your elasticity examples 1 through 4, okay? You've already looked at this. Price times quantity demanded equals total revenue, so this is simple. Multiply or divide, depending on what variable you need to find, okay? Our next part, so we're looking at these shifts, right, in the markets, either supply or demand, okay? So I'm going to skip ahead a second here in these notes to get to equilibrium, because we'll look at cost of production, but like I said, that'll be a separate part. All right, so equilibrium. This is the point at which the supply curve and the demand curve meet. So again, here's your demand curve, always pointing downwards, and here's your supply curve, always pointing upwards. Wherever they meet is going to be equilibrium. This is where the market is at its happiest, okay? This is where you see the price and quantity that meet the needs of consumers as well as the suppliers without causing a shortage or a surplus. So a shortage is a situation in which buyers want more of a product than sellers are willing to make available at a particular price. When there is a shortage, then sellers will increase the price of a good or service because it is more scarce. This means that less consumers will demand that good. So we're looking here at this supply. Here is the navy green is the demand. So at this particular price, right, the amount supplied is less than what is demanded. So we have a shortage. You have examples of this too on your homework. A surplus. This is when the quantity supplied is more than the quantity demanded. Suppliers will decrease their prices because their item is less scarce. Demand will increase because more buyers are willing and able to buy the good at a lower price. Okay, so now if I'm looking at this price, if I come over here on the demand, right, they're demanding very few of this for this high price. Whereas the suppliers are willing to produce a lot at this price. So in order to get rid of all that extra, they lower their price, and as they lower it, their quantity will meet up in this equilibrium point. All right, so when a shift occurs in either or both supply and demand, then the equilibrium price and quantity change as well. Changes will increase, decrease, or be undetermined. Okay, so let's say, for an example, that we've determined, right, that coffee is terrible for you. It causes stomach cancer. So consumers' demand will decrease at first. So whereas this was my original price, my original quantity, we don't know to what degree these curves are shifting, okay? But we know that the quantity is going to decrease, and that equilibrium price is also going to decrease, okay? Alternatively, let's say that Subaru invents something new technology, so they're supplying more cars, and at the same point, they become cheaper and more cool to buy a Subaru. So the demand will increase. Okay, so now we have two things shifting. Okay, and depending on the degree of this shift, right? Again, I don't know. It could be a big shift in demand. It could be a smaller shift in demand. My price is kind of undetermined, but I know regardless, my quantity is going to increase. Okay, so this new quantity goes up, but my price is undetermined. Okay? So to make this easier on you, I did include a chart here. So when you're doing your homework, come back to this part here and pause it. Okay? Because as you read your various scenarios, if you know that the demand curve is shifting, but the supply curve isn't doing anything, you know that both the quantity and the price are going to increase. Okay? Looking at our next bit, a price ceiling. Price ceilings are put in place by the government to keep certain goods and services at a reasonable price. They are set below equilibrium price. So any point below this point here is going to be a ceiling. Why is it a ceiling? Because the market has a natural tendency to want to move to that equilibrium point. Okay? So they want to go up, but they can't. Think about being in a room. If I want to keep going up in a room, what will I hit? I'll hit the ceiling. Okay? You cannot set those goods above what price level the government set, and this causes shortages. Okay, right? Because here's my supply. I have this much coming into my quantity at this point, and then I have this much being demanded at this point. So there's more demand than there is supply. Suppliers won't want to sell at lower price, and consumers will want to buy more at a lower price. On the opposite, a price floor. This sets the lowest possible price for a product. You cannot pay less for this product. One example is minimum wage, right? Of course, your employer would love to just have you work for them for free and not have to pay you, right? So they want to go for a lower price, but they can't. They can go no lower. If you're in a room and you want to go lower, you'll hit the floor, okay? So a price floor is set at the equilibrium price or higher. This can cause surpluses if set above equilibrium, right? You have more workers willing to be paid a higher wage, but less employers willing to pay at that rate. Okay. And then flexibility. Prices allow resources to be used in the best possible way. Suppliers have an incentive to make profit. Consumers have an incentive to buy more at a certain price. The market makes only what it will sell. If there is no demand or incentive, that supplier will leave the market. The flexibility in price allows for efficiency. Under some circumstances, we can see a supply shock. This occurs if there are difficult times, there may be a shortage of supplies, and there becomes a problem of how to divvy up the available supply. So like during a hurricane or wartime. One way the government deals with a supply shock is via rationing. This allows a fixed amount for everyone when there's a limited supply. The other alternative is to raise the prices. This is where we see black markets, because now we have higher prices. This item becomes scarce, so I'll sell it to you illegally. Okay? So a black market is an illegal market in which goods and services are sold above their legal price. Okay, and I will do one more video that goes over the homework.